The alien queen's arrogance. In the heart of the alien empire, on a vast and cold planet far from Earth, Queen Xylaris ruled with an iron fist. She was a towering figure, standing over 8 feet tall, with skin as dark as the night sky and eyes that burned like twin suns. To the creatures of her world, she was a goddess, a being of immense power, unmatched intelligence, and unparalleled beauty. No one dared challenge her. And why would they? She was the epitome of perfection, the supreme ruler of her people. On this day, Xylaris stood before a gathering of her most trusted commanders and advisors. The grand hall was filled with the faint hum of technology and the soft glow of alien lights. It was a place where important decisions were made, decisions that could affect the entire galaxy. But today, the topic of conversation was nothing like the usual political or military strategies. Today, the discussion was about humans. Breeding with them. Queen Xylaris scoffed, her voice rich with disdain as she looked down at the holographic display of a human male, projected in front of her. A human? Are you suggesting that our species should lower itself to such a primitive level? Her commanders exchanged nervous glances, but none dared to speak. Xylaris was known for her sharp temper, and those who had once questioned her had not lived to tell the tale. The mere suggestion that the great Xylaris might consider breeding with a human was enough to make her laugh out loud in amusement. Do you see how weak they are? She continued, gesturing toward the image of the human. Their bodies are frail, their minds primitive. They have nothing of value to offer us. Our bloodline is far superior. She leaned back in her throne, her smile wide, filled with arrogance. The idea of mingling with such a weak species is beneath me. They are nothing more than insects. Her advisors remained silent, their eyes focused on the floor. They knew better than to argue with the queen, especially when she was in this mood. But there was one among them who still felt the need to speak, an older scientist named Dr. Valthor, known for his knowledge of interspecies biology. My queen, Dr. Valthor said cautiously, bowing his head. It is true that humans are not as advanced as we are. But there are certain biological factors that might make them interesting subjects for study. Their resilience, their adaptability. Perhaps we could use them to strengthen our own gene pool. Enough. Xylaris snapped, her sharp voice cutting through the air like a blade. You are wasting my time, doctor. I am not interested in breeding with some hairless ape. She stood up, her massive form towering over the assembly. Their entire species is insignificant. They're nothing more than a blip on the radar of the universe. We have conquered entire star systems, why should we waste our time with them? She paced back and forth, her footsteps echoing in the cold, silent hall. Her long, flowing robes billowed behind her, shimmering with the glow of the alien crystals embedded in the fabric. The very air seemed to tremble under the weight of her presence. I've seen humans before, she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. Their cities are primitive. Their technology is laughable. They fight each other over petty things. They are weak. And yet, they believe they can challenge us. They dare to think they are worthy of our attention. A few of her commanders nodded in agreement, murmuring their assent. They too thought the idea of mixing with humans was absurd. The queen's word was law, and no one dared to question her judgment. Xylaris paused for a moment, as if considering the matter. She was, after all, not just a ruler, she was a being of logic, intelligence, and strength. She was used to facing challenges head-on and overcoming them with ease. Yet, something about this idea of breeding with a human still gnawed at her. Why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone suggest such an idea to her? She turned back to Dr. Valthor, her gaze cold and sharp. Tell me, doctor, she said, her tone slow and deliberate. What do you think will happen if we allow such a thing? Will they somehow make us stronger? Will their weak genes somehow improve ours? Dr. Valthor swallowed nervously. He knew he was treading dangerous ground. Well, Your Majesty, he began, there have been some studies on human resilience, their ability to adapt to harsh environments. Perhaps their ability to survive in conditions we might find challenging. Enough, Xylaris interrupted again, her anger rising. You are grasping at straws, Doctor. The fact is, humans are nothing more than a fleeting species. Their strength, if it can even be called that, comes from desperation. We do not need them. We have no need for their primitive ways. And I will not lower myself to entertain such a ridiculous idea. With that, the meeting was adjourned. The commanders and advisors filed out of the room, bowing low as they left. Xylaris stood alone, her eyes still fixed on the holographic image of the human. Her lips curled into a wicked smile as she thought about the pathetic species that dared to think they were worthy of her attention. But as she turned to leave, a strange feeling stirred deep inside her. She shook it off, dismissing it as nothing more than a fleeting thought. After all, she was the queen. The supreme ruler. Nothing could ever challenge her, especially not a human. Or so she thought. The human hero's challenge. The atmosphere in Queen Xylaris's palace remained tense after the meeting. The alien queen's words echoed throughout the vast halls, words of contempt, words that dismissed humanity as little more than an insignificant speck in the universe. Yet, deep within the corridors of her empire, something was stirring. The queen's arrogance had sparked an unexpected response. Across the galaxy, on a distant human colony, a young man named Captain Adrian Kane stood in the briefing room, listening intently to his superiors. He was a fighter, a warrior, but most of all, he was a symbol of human perseverance. His people had been colonizing new worlds for generations, overcoming impossible odds. And now, the time had come to face the greatest challenge yet, the powerful alien empire led by Queen Xylaris. Do you understand the risks, Captain? General Alara asked, her voice grave. She had seen the horrors of war, and she knew what humanity was up against. The alien queen is unlike anything we've ever faced. She's stronger, smarter, and completely ruthless. Adrian's expression remained calm. He had faced death many times before and had never flinched. He was one of the best humans had to offer, known for his bravery and unshakable resolve. I understand, General, he replied, his voice steady. But I've fought to protect humanity's future. And I'm not about to let an alien queen look down on us without a fight. General Alara nodded. She knew Adrian was driven by more than just duty. He had a deep respect for humanity's potential, a belief that even in the darkest times, humans could rise to the challenge. And that belief was about to be tested in a way no one could predict. Back on the alien planet, Queen Xylaris was enjoying a rare moment of quiet. The echo of her laughter from earlier still rang in her mind. How could such a small, weak species think it could rival her people? Yet, even as she basked in her superiority, there was a growing unease deep inside her. She had never given much thought to humans, but the idea that they might be worthy of her attention, that thought alone seemed to gnaw at her pride. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden transmission. The holographic screen flickered to life, and the face of an unfamiliar human appeared before her. I am Captain Adrian Kane of the United Earth Forces, the human said with a calm, unwavering voice. And I challenge you, Queen Xylaris. Xylaris's eyes narrowed. A challenge, she echoed, her voice dripping with amusement. From a human? Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? I know exactly who you are, Adrian replied, unflinching. And I know that humans have more strength in their hearts than you'll ever understand. You think we're weak, but we've survived on the brink of extinction for centuries. We'll survive you too. Xylaris's laughter filled the room, rich and mocking. Survive me, she said, her voice cold. You dare speak to me this way, little human. You are nothing to me. But Adrian stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. Maybe. But I'm more than just a little human. If you think we're so weak, then let's put it to the test. The queen's eyes flashed with fury, but also with curiosity. She had expected to crush any human who would dare challenge her, but something about this one was different. He wasn't shaking in fear, like most of them did. He wasn't begging for mercy or groveling for his life. Instead, he was standing tall, his words sharp as daggers, his spirit unbroken. "Why would you challenge me, human?" Xylaris finally asked, a hint of interest in her tone. "What is it that you think you can prove?" Adrian's lips curled into a small, confident smile. "I'm here to prove that humans have the strength to face anything, even someone as powerful as you. We don't need to be superior to you in power. We only need to be superior in will." Xylaris stared at him, her mind racing. It was the first time anyone had ever spoken to her like this. It intrigued her, yet infuriated her at the same time. How could a mere human talk to her, an immortal queen, as if they were equals? "You amuse me, human," she said finally, her voice smooth and deadly. "I shall allow you to make your move. But do not think for a moment that you stand a chance against me." Adrian's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold determination. "I don't need a chance. I just need to prove that humans can survive anything, even you." As the transmission ended, Queen Xylaris stared at the empty screen, her fingers tracing the edge of her throne. There was a strange feeling bubbling inside her. She had never been challenged in this way, and she had certainly never been spoken to like this by anyone, let alone a human. She stood and paced slowly across the room, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. The audacity of this human. The defiance. It was almost exhilarating. But it was also infuriating. How could a weak, insignificant human stand before her with such confidence? What did he hope to gain? And why did her pride feel wounded by his challenge? One thing was certain, this human would not be easily dismissed. The challenge was set, and the queen's arrogance was about to face a test she had never seen coming. Little did she know, the human had more than just his will to rely on. And it would soon be clear that humans, despite their apparent weaknesses, were capable of things far beyond her understanding. The unlikely event. Days passed since Captain Adrian Kane's challenge, but Queen Xylaris couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled deep within her. The transmission replayed over and over in her mind. That human, his defiance, his unshakable confidence, it had struck a chord with her. She had dismissed his words as the reckless boasting of a lesser species, but a lingering thought kept interrupting her thoughts. What if, she mused quietly to herself, though she was loath to admit it. The thought was absurd, impossible even. And yet, it clung to her like a shadow in the back of her mind. In her palace, hidden deep beneath the surface of her home world, the queen retreated to her personal chambers. The lights flickered as she passed through the corridors, and a sense of cold discomfort washed over her. She had grown used to ruling through fear and respect, but for the first time, she felt something unfamiliar, a creeping sense of vulnerability. Xylaris stood before a mirror, her towering form reflecting in the sleek surface. She ran her long, delicate fingers over her smooth skin, her sharp features softening in contemplation. Her eyes were wide and bright with power, but there was something else, something new. A strange sensation began to coil deep within her body, a sensation she couldn't quite explain. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. A slight flutter in her stomach. An odd pressure, like a small weight pressing against her core. She dismissed it as nothing more than a momentary discomfort, something that would pass. But it didn't pass. In fact, it only grew stronger. The sensation deepened, and soon she felt a strange warmth in her abdomen. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at her reflection, her mind racing. Her heart, too, began to beat faster, though she had no idea why. She turned to the holographic display beside her, reaching out to call her top scientists and doctors. She needed an explanation, anything to make sense of this. But as her hand hovered over the device, something stopped her. Something inside her told her to wait, to feel it just a little longer. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, allowing the sensation to take hold. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The warmth inside her grew, and it was no longer a discomfort. It was something different. Something that felt strangely familiar, yet utterly alien to her. Impossible, she whispered to herself. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock on the door, interrupting her thoughts. A young officer entered the room, her face pale with concern. "My queen, there is something you must see," the officer said, her voice trembling slightly. "We have detected unusual readings, a biological anomaly." Xylaris turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. She had heard enough to know that whatever this was, it could not be ignored. She had been ruler for centuries, untouchable and invincible. And yet, now, her own body was betraying her. "Bring them to me," Xylaris ordered, her voice cold, though her insides churned with unease. The officer nodded and hurried out of the room. Moments later, several of the Queen's top biologists arrived with advanced diagnostic equipment. They were quickly ushered to the chamber where the Queen stood, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. "Your Majesty," Dr. Valthor began, his voice filled with concern, "we've detected anomalies in your biological systems. There are changes happening that we cannot explain." Xylaris's eyes narrowed at the mention of her body's strange reaction. "What changes? Explain yourself," she demanded, her voice a dangerous whisper. Dr. Valthor hesitated but quickly gathered his courage. "We believe. Your Majesty, this may sound difficult to believe, but it seems as though you are pregnant." Xylaris's face twisted in disbelief. "Pregnant?" she spat, as though the word itself was foreign to her. "How is that possible?" The scientists exchanged uneasy glances, their hesitation palpable. Finally, one of the younger doctors spoke up, "We cannot rule out that this is the result of a human's DNA interacting with yours. It may have triggered something, an unexpected response." Xylaris's heart skipped a beat. She staggered back slightly, her mind spinning. "You mean to tell me that this human has somehow..." Her thoughts raced, and for the first time in centuries, she felt a deep, unsettling fear. Could it really be true? Could the defiant human Captain Kane's challenge have somehow led to this? Her thoughts were interrupted when the doctor added, "There's more, Your Majesty. The signs of this pregnancy, though in its early stages, are unmistakable. This is not something we've ever seen before. It's unlike anything we've encountered." Xylaris stood frozen, staring blankly at the scientists. She had been so sure that the idea of mingling with a human was beneath her. Now, the reality of what was happening to her body was something she could neither control nor understand. She turned away from the scientists, pacing the room. Her mind was clouded with questions and confusion. How could this happen? How could she, a queen of unmatched power, be carrying a child that was the result of a human's influence? The room grew silent as she continued to walk in circles, her thoughts a whirlwind of frustration and disbelief. Every part of her wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as impossible. But the physical evidence was undeniable. She could feel it in her very core. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. And in that moment, Queen Xylaris realized that she was no longer in control. Something had changed, something beyond her power. Her arrogance, her confidence, her certainty that humans were weak and insignificant, it was all slipping away. She was not invincible. And humanity, it seemed, was not as insignificant as she had once believed. The Queen's inner struggle. Queen Xylaris stood at the edge of her private balcony, her mind a tumultuous storm. Below her, the vast expanse of her homeworld stretched out, cities of shining spires, vast fields, and oceans, all meticulously controlled and maintained by her power. To her people, she was a goddess, a force of nature. Her rule was absolute, unchallenged. Or at least, that was how it had been until now. She couldn't escape the gnawing sensation that had begun to settle deep inside her, a feeling she had never experienced before. The warmth inside her was growing stronger with each passing day, a constant reminder of the alien presence that had somehow found its way into her very being. The doctors had confirmed it, she was carrying a child. And not just any child, one that was the result of the human DNA that had somehow mixed with her own. How could this happen? She thought bitterly. I, the mighty queen, reduced to carrying the spawn of a human. Her mind was clouded with a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, humiliation. She had dismissed humanity as weak, primitive, unworthy of her attention. And yet, somehow, a human had managed to touch her in a way no one else ever had. The thought of it alone filled her with a deep, painful sense of betrayal. It wasn't just her pride that was wounded, it was something deeper, something she had never acknowledged until now. The alien queen clenched her fists, her long nails digging into her palms. How could I have been so foolish? As the days passed, her body began to change, and not just in ways she could see. The physical transformations were subtle, nothing overt, but Sci-fiseries could feel it. Her senses were sharper, her thoughts clearer, but there was also an unsettling pull within her. Her body was no longer entirely her own, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly powerless. She had always relied on logic, on her incredible strength, on her ability to control every situation, every person. But now, she was faced with something entirely beyond her comprehension, something that couldn't be controlled. Her pride had never been more fragile, and it filled her with a bitter, consuming rage. The Queen's thoughts turned to Captain Adrian Kane, the human who had dared challenge her. He had done more than defy her, he had ignited something within her, something that she hadn't been prepared to face. He had become a symbol of everything she had once despised, and now, he was the father of her child. The idea of it made her stomach churn, but there was an undeniable truth she couldn't ignore, he had won. In her chambers, the Queen paced relentlessly. This is absurd. A mistake, she told herself. I must rid myself of this. Whatever this human has caused, I will fix it. I am the Queen. She tried to push away the fear, the vulnerability, the strange connection to the life growing inside her. But deep down, she knew that this wasn't something she could simply erase. It had taken root inside her, and no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the truth remained. As her thoughts swirled, a knock at the door broke her concentration. Her eyes narrowed, and she quickly straightened, forcing her emotions back into their familiar, controlled state. Enter, she commanded, her voice steady but laced with irritation. The door slid open, and Dr. Valthor entered, carrying the latest data on her condition. His expression was serious, but his eyes betrayed concern. He had never seen the Queen in such a state, unsettled, vulnerable, confused. My Queen, he said, bowing respectfully, though he could sense the tension in the air. The results are in. We've studied the changes within you, and I regret to inform you that, there are more unforeseen consequences. Sci-fiseries turned sharply, her piercing gaze fixing on him. What more do you mean, doctor? She demanded. Is there something else wrong with me? Tell me now. Dr. Valthor hesitated before continuing. There are changes within your biology that go beyond mere pregnancy. Your physiology is adapting to the human DNA inside you. It's influencing your mind as well. Sci-fiseries narrowed her eyes. Influencing my mind, she repeated, her voice growing colder with each word. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Valthor said cautiously, that the human DNA is altering your thought processes. Your emotions, your instincts, they're becoming more intense. You're experiencing things you've never felt before, things you've never had to deal with. Compassion, attachment, vulnerability. A chill ran down Sci-fiseries' spine. She could feel it now, something deep inside her that she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. The strange warmth inside her had become a force she could no longer ignore. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Her mind was being affected, her emotions stirring in ways that were alien to her. "This is a curse," she whispered, her voice hoarse with frustration. "A weakness. I cannot allow this." Dar. Valthor didn't reply, knowing better than to argue with the queen when she was in such a state. He only watched silently as the queen struggled to maintain her composure, her emotions threatening to break free. This wasn't just about her pride anymore, it was about her very identity. "I'll find a way to fix this," she muttered to herself, as if the words alone could erase the overwhelming sense of helplessness that was creeping up on her. "I will not allow this human filth to shape me." But even as she spoke, the reality was becoming clear. The transformation inside her was not something that could be undone. It was too far gone. And as much as she tried to deny it, she was beginning to understand one painful truth. She was no longer the untouchable, invincible queen she once was. She was changing, and she had no idea where this journey would lead. The shifting power. The days turned to weeks, and the changes within Queen Xylaris continued to intensify. The human child growing inside her was no longer a distant curiosity, it was a powerful force that had taken root in every part of her being. She could feel its influence in every thought, every decision. It was as if the child were not just a part of her body but also a part of her soul, slowly reshaping her, altering her very essence. She had tried to maintain control, tried to push away the emotions that she had never once allowed herself to feel. Anger, confusion, fear, these were things she had mastered, wielded like weapons. But now, these emotions were slipping through her defenses like cracks in an otherwise impenetrable wall. She had always been the queen. She had ruled with an iron fist, her authority unchallenged by anyone, until now. The irony of it gnawed at her. The one person she had dismissed so easily, so arrogantly, had come to haunt her in ways she could never have imagined. Captain Adrian Kane, the human she had laughed at, had somehow become her greatest threat. Not through weapons, not through military power, but through the most unexpected of means, by challenging her pride, by forcing her to confront a side of herself she had long buried. Now, as her body continued to change, her grip on her empire was beginning to slip. The once loyal commanders and officers who had adored her from afar began to notice her struggle. They whispered in the shadows, questioning her decisions, sensing the uncertainty that radiated from their queen. They had never seen her so vulnerable, so human. One morning, as Xylaris stood before her empire's war table, reviewing reports of unrest among the outer colonies, she could feel their eyes on her. Her generals, her trusted advisors, none of them dared to speak, but the silence was deafening. They were waiting for her to make the call, waiting for her to show them that she was still the indomitable leader they had always followed. But inside, Xylaris felt the pressure building. The weight of the child inside her seemed to press on her very soul, distorting her thoughts, clouding her once sharp mind. She had always been sure of herself, of her ability to make decisions without hesitation. But now, she hesitated. The child was influencing her, making her question everything she had ever known. "What's wrong with you, my queen?" One of her generals, Commander Thalek, finally spoke, his voice full of concern. "You've grown distant." Xylaris stiffened. She knew the truth in his words, but she couldn't admit it. Not to them, not to herself. "I am fine, Commander," she snapped, her tone colder than she intended. "We will proceed with the planned assault on the human colonies. The rebellion must be crushed." But Thalek wasn't convinced. His gaze softened slightly. "My queen, the rebellion is not the only issue at hand. You've been different. And your health." "Enough," she bellowed, her voice sharp as a whip. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. For a moment, the only sound was her heavy breathing, the pulse in her temples hammering painfully in rhythm with the life inside her. She had allowed her emotions to surface, and now, the entire room knew. They had seen the cracks in her facade. "Dismissed," she ordered coldly, her eyes narrowing. The generals exchanged wary glances before bowing and exiting, leaving Xylaris alone in the war room. The doors closed behind them, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself sit down. The room felt heavy, suffocating. She tried to breathe deeply, but it didn't help. The walls of her empire, once so steadfast and secure, now seemed to close in on her. She placed her hands on the table, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingers. The power she had once held with such certainty was slipping away, like sand through her fingers. The child inside her, the human child, was the source of her weakening grip. It was taking from her, stealing her confidence, her control. It was forcing her to feel things she had never been willing to face. "I must fix this," she whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow, even to her. There was no way to fix this, not without admitting that she had been changed, irrevocably. And as much as she wanted to dismiss the child, to rid herself of this weakness, she couldn't. There was a connection between them now, one she couldn't explain. Her thoughts drifted back to Adrian Kane, the human who had dared to challenge her. He had triggered all of this. His defiance had set her on this path, and now, she couldn't escape it. She was bound to him in ways that defied logic, in ways that made her question everything about herself. And despite everything, despite her pride and hatred for humanity, part of her was beginning to understand. She stood abruptly, her mind racing. The future was no longer certain. She had once believed she could control everything, bend the universe to her will. But now, she realized that perhaps the universe had other plans for her. Perhaps the child, this strange, unexpected link to humanity, was part of that plan. "Adrian Kane," she muttered darkly. "You think you've won, but you don't understand the power you've unleashed." As she turned to leave the war room, a new resolve formed inside her. She would not let this weakness, this humanity, define her. She would take back control. She would find a way to harness this new power, this strange connection between them, and turn it into something that would make her stronger than ever. But first, she would need to confront the one person who had shaken her to her core, the human who had dared to challenge her. The reckoning. Queen Xylaris stood before the massive viewport of her palace, gazing out into the black abyss of space. The stars seemed to mock her from a distance, cold, indifferent, beautiful in their silence. Once, she had seen the stars as symbols of her own power, scattered fragments of her vast empire. Now, they felt like distant beacons of a future she could no longer control. Her fingers curled into tight fists, the claws at the tips of her hands biting into her skin. "What have I become?" she thought bitterly. Her mind spun in circles, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her identity. She had been untouchable. The ruler of all, the supreme being whose authority was absolute. And now she was at the mercy of a human's touch. The idea of it filled her with loathing, but more than that, it terrified her. That human, Adrian Kane, had planted the seeds of something in her that she couldn't uproot, no matter how hard she tried. His challenge had cut deeper than she could have ever imagined. Her pride had been her greatest weapon, and now it was her greatest vulnerability. The war table behind her was empty now. The generals, the officers, they no longer looked at her with the same reverence. The whispers had become louder, and though they hid behind careful words, Xylaris could hear them all. The queen is weak. The queen is losing control. But she would not allow herself to be reduced to this. She would not stand idly by while her empire crumbled. No. Xylaris would take back what was hers. She would confront the very thing that had undone her. "Adrian Kane," she thought. "You have ignited something in me. You've changed me. But I will not let this make me weak." With a sharp motion, she activated the communication console. A holographic screen flickered to life in front of her, and the face of her most trusted advisor, General Valdar, appeared. His stern expression didn't falter, but his eyes betrayed a glimmer of concern. "Your Majesty," he said, his tone respectful yet edged with caution. "What are your orders?" Xylaris stood tall, her voice unwavering. Prepare a fleet. We're going to find Captain Adrian Kane. Valder's brow furrowed. Your Majesty, I must advise against it. The human colonies are not what they seem. There are risks involved. I will not ask again, General, Xylaris interrupted sharply. Do as I command. I will make him pay for what he has done to me. There was a pause, the tension palpable. Finally, Valdar nodded and bowed. As you wish, my queen. Xylaris stood motionless for a long moment, her eyes never leaving the stars. The decision had been made. She would seek out the one who had defied her, the one who had shattered her perception of herself. But she knew this was no longer about revenge, it was about control. She needed to prove to herself that she was still the queen. She needed to restore her strength, to reclaim her power. And Adrian Kane, with all his arrogance and confidence, had unknowingly become the instrument of her reckoning. The fleet was ready within hours, an armada of ships prepared to strike fear into the heart of any who dared challenge her. Her advisers, though reluctant, had complied. They had witnessed their queen's power, and now they saw the desperation in her eyes. This was not the calm, collected ruler they once knew. This was a woman on the edge, ready to throw everything she had into one final confrontation. The warships cut through space like blades through the void, heading straight for the human colonies. Xylaris stood in the command center, her back straight, her face cold as ice. Every part of her felt the surge of authority she once wielded, but something else was present now, a subtle unease, a strange tension in the air. Her body ached with the changes, her mind buzzing with thoughts she couldn't silence. But she pushed it all down. She couldn't afford weakness, not now. The journey was long, and as they neared the human colonies, she felt her pulse quicken. The looming confrontation with Captain Kane was imminent. She had no plan for what would come after. They would deal with him, yes, but what would happen to her after? And then, the transmission came. A holographic message flickered to life before her, the face of Captain Adrian Kane, calm and unwavering, appearing in front of her. His gaze was direct, unblinking, as if he already knew what was coming. I knew you'd come, he said, his voice steady. But I must warn you, Queen Xylaris. You will not find what you're looking for. Xylaris's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at him. For a brief moment, she felt the urge to rip the image apart, to crush it with the full might of her power. But instead, she stood still, listening, waiting. You think you can still control everything, Kane continued, his tone almost pitying. But you're wrong. You never were in control. You've been manipulated, and now, you're trapped in something far greater than yourself. The words hit her like a physical blow. Trapped? The thought spiraled in her mind, but she quickly shoved it aside. She was the queen. She was not trapped. She would never be trapped. You think I care about your warnings? She sneered, her voice laced with venom. You will regret ever crossing me, human. Kane's smile remained unchanged, his eyes gleaming with a quiet knowing. You're already regretting it. And you will regret it even more when you realize what you've become. Before she could respond, the transmission ended abruptly. The last image of his face lingered in her mind, his words echoing in her head like a haunting refrain. She wasn't sure whether it was anger or fear that coursed through her veins, but it didn't matter. She had made her choice. She would confront him, face to face. The fleet was now within striking distance of the human colonies. The time for talk was over. The reckoning had come. The clash of realities. The human colonies loomed before Queen Xylaris's fleet like a thorn in the side of her empire. The vast stretch of stars above and the soft hum of the warships around her did little to steady her nerves. There was no turning back now. The fleet was poised for the strike, and her empire's fate, along with her own, rested on the precipice of this final confrontation. Xylaris's hands trembled slightly as she stared at the holographic display of the human colony. Her breath came slower now, her senses heightened to a degree she had never felt before. The air around her felt charged, as if something was about to break, something she could not control. The child within her stirred, its presence more pronounced than ever, tugging at her mind, urging her to make the right choice, yet she could not fathom what that choice might be. "Ready the invasion," Sci-fiseries commanded, her voice firm despite the internal chaos swirling inside her. The words felt mechanical, detached from the emotions that were brewing within. The officers around her moved swiftly, preparing the troops and setting the fleet on its course. But the Queen's mind was elsewhere. "You will not break me," she told herself. "I am the Queen. I am invincible." But even as she repeated those words in her mind, they felt like a distant echo, fading further into the background. Her mind drifted back to the last conversation with Adrian Kane. The image of his face, so calm, so sure of himself, had haunted her since that moment. His words had struck deeper than she cared to admit. "You're already regretting it." Regretting it? The thought gnawed at her. She had always prided herself on never looking back, on never second-guessing her decisions. But now, with every passing moment, she felt the weight of her choices press harder on her chest. The human had said something that struck her like lightning: "You've been manipulated." At first, she had dismissed it as arrogance. But now, with the growing shift inside her, the growing connection to the child, she couldn't help but wonder, had she truly been manipulated all along? The human influence was everywhere now, in the way her mind felt clouded, in the way her body changed, in the way she had begun questioning herself in ways she never had before. Was this part of her transformation? Was this the cost of the child inside her? The moment the fleet entered the human colony's orbit, Sci-fiseries was briefed. Adrian Kane had already made his move. A lone ship, one of the humans most advanced, was waiting for her. It was a sleek, silver craft, small, almost unassuming, but powerful in its own right. The communication line pinged, and Sci-fiseries' heart skipped a beat as the face of Captain Kane appeared before her once again. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she saw the quiet defiance in his gaze, the same defiance she had dismissed months ago. The same defiance that had unraveled her. He didn't speak at first, just observed her with an almost maddening calm. Sci-fiseries clenched her fists at her sides, willing herself not to show any weakness. "I came for you, human. I will not leave until you answer for your insolence," she spat, her voice laced with fury. Kane's lips twitched into a small smile. "You've come for me? That's brave of you." His tone was casual, almost mocking. But beneath it, there was something more, a quiet understanding that unsettled her. "But you've already paid the price, Sci-fiseries. You've lost far more than you can gain by attacking me." The Queen's chest tightened. How did he know? How did he always seem to be one step ahead? "You think this is over?" Sci-fiseries hissed. "You think I've been bested by a human? I will destroy you. I will make you regret ever crossing me." But Kane's smile remained unshaken. "I don't think you will, Sci-fiseries," he replied softly, his voice almost compassionate. "You've already begun to change. And I'm afraid you're not the one in control anymore." The words stung, but they weren't just words, they were the truth. Sci-fiseries could feel it. She had never been more aware of the strange presence within her. The child. Her connection to the human world. The change that was creeping inside, twisting her sense of self. "I am the Queen," she said through clenched teeth, her voice quivering despite her best efforts. "I will make you bow before me." For the first time since their meeting, Kane's expression softened. "I don't want you to bow, Sci-fiseries. I want you to see what's really happening. You're not losing power, you're gaining something far greater than you've ever known. But you have to accept it. Accept yourself." Sci-fiseries' heart raced, her body trembling. It felt like he was looking straight into her soul, as if he knew her better than anyone. As if he could see all the parts of her she had spent a lifetime hiding. She took a step forward, unable to stop herself, her gaze unwavering. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I will not accept this. I will not become weak." But even as she said the words, she felt something inside her snap. The connection to her own humanity, the very thing she had resisted, surged like an unstoppable tide. And suddenly, she realized. She already was weak. Her own body betrayed her. The warmth that had settled deep within her, the child, the life that had come from the human touch, was no longer a curse. It was a truth she could no longer deny. Kane's face softened further, his gaze filled with something like pity, but also a deep understanding. "It's not weakness, Sci-fiseries. It's humanity. And in the end, it's what makes us stronger." The fleet around her remained still. Her generals, her soldiers, they all waited, uncertain of what to do. The mighty queen stood at the edge of a precipice, a battle raging not just between her and the human captain, but within herself. For the first time, Sci-fiseries realized that the real war had never been about destroying humanity. It had been about the war inside her, a war she could no longer avoid. And as the child inside her stirred once again, she understood one thing: this was only the beginning.